This is crap. Never call its number, ever. Oh, wait, you can if you're a woman. They'll turn everything into domestic, even some that didn't happen, just because you didn't get what you wanted right when you wanted it. We're having to go to services that are dominated by women because they don't want to do the real jobs like construction. They can do everything that a man can do, but instead it's the easy way out. They can do everything that a man can do, but instead it's the easy way out, right? Right? No, this is the thing, is that as a male there is no, this is the thing, is that as a male there is no support. None. Now what did I type in here? How to turn in abuse as a disabled victim. So let's read it. There's a few of them that I highlighted. Oh, God. See, it always gives us the wrong number from the start. Thank you, Google, you're trash. National Domestic Violence Hotline, domestic violence support, but they don't give a shit. Says, people also ask, are disabled people more vulnerable to abuse? Not only do disabled people experience higher rates of domestic abuse, they also experience more barriers to accessing support, such as health and social care services and domestic abuse and services. Domestic abuse services. And that's very true. We're less likely to be in a relationship, just so you know. A disabled man is far less likely to be in a relationship. It says, how often are disabled people abused? It says people with disabilities experience violent crime at twice the rate of people without disabilities. People without disabilities. People with disabilities are 3 times as likely to be sexually assaulted as their peers without disabilities. What are the 5 signs of psychological abuse? It says 5 signs of emotional abuse. They are hypercritical or judgmental towards you. And that's what I have to deal with. Eventually, I start acting that way back. And people don't like it. It says they ignore boundaries or invade your privacy. That's the thing, is that everybody ignores my boundaries and invades my privacy. It says they are possessive or controlling. We're supposed to have laws here in Oregon that prevent victims from being targets of this kind of abuse, by the way. Possessive and or controlling. Same thing in Nebraska. Same thing in Colorado. Same thing in Montana. It says they're manipulative, and you get to see all the manipulation I've had to go through. When people have it set in their head that you're an idiot and they're going to make decisions for you because obviously you can't do it yourself. No, it's not that kind of can't do it myself. It's the treating people like they're mentally retarded. The term mentally ill is literally something no one can get past. You've already decided our guilt and you've sealed our fate. When you start making decisions for us, that's possessive and controlling. And it also gets into manipulative. In many cases, a lot of people like to pressure me to make a decision right now about something that they know is against my best interest. They just don't want to do their jobs. So they're trying to bully me through it and say, oh, it's his decision. No, you're bullying me. It's harmful and it's scary. not having to speak up on the internet. That makes it even more dangerous. But it's also the only option a person has when people are ignoring their boundaries or invading thesee privacy. So some of the things here we're going to get into very shortly. It says they often dismiss you and your feelings. That's what all of your little comments do. All of them. They're all dismissive of our experience and our feelings. And as men, we're not allowed to have them. Or you will talk over them. How dare we have feelings? Then it's time to go off on story time and tell us your entire life story. And then I'm treated like I'm horrible and invading their boundaries and privacy because they're talking over me and telling me all about themselves. I'm asking for help stopping abuse. I'm not asking for these people to tell me their whole life story. That's one of the scariest things as a male being abused, is that women are so used to men not talking. That's because we have to be afraid too. Anything we say will intentionally be used wrong and out of context because we're emotionless, apparently. We have no feelings. People don't stop to try to think about how I feel every time they dismiss what I'm telling them. Hey, could you please listen before we go making decisions and before you make decisions for me? Because that is extremely harmful. It's dismissive, not just of that person's feelings, but also the harm inherent in it, which is why you need to understand the situation by taking that time to listen without interrupting. The victim knows their situation better than you do. How many people have forced me into harmful situations because they wanted to make decisions for me after not listening, after making unsolicited advice? Yes, I agree with what much of they're saying, but just because I agree with what somebody's saying doesn't mean that they're right in the way they're going about it. When I say I can't do it alone, there's a reason for it. Oh, well, legally, who's going to fucking stop them? It's somebody they can call mentally ill and dismiss everything that they've said, no matter what, unless you're there to give a shit. And you still have to record it for everyone's safety. But when nobody helps to turn that in, ever, because they're trying to jump the gun and not listen to the situation, it becomes very scary. This is why people with disabilities do not report abuse. We try, actually. It says an abuser may take away access to the tools a person with a disability uses to communicate, such as a computer or phone. This is what Scott DaCosta did to me when I tried to turn him in. He abused his power to separate me from the evidence that I had against him and to have me locked up as a crazy person. He went and slandered my name over and over again to the people in the community because I told the truth and I tried to get people to hear me. It says people with disabilities may be less likely to be taken seriously when they make a report of sexual assault or abuse. Yeah, exactly. Nobody cares. But even more so if we're a male, you're going to get to see that. It says here, what is systemic abuse and disability? Systemic abuse. Systemic abuse refers to practices that take away a person's independence and dignity. Systemic abuse happens in settings where other people are making decisions for the person who has a disability. The thing is, they're making decisions based on not listening. I don't have a friend or family member who's going to help me get heard because my friends and family aren't listening to me. How can I trust any of them if they're just going to make decisions for me without listening? Please take that time one-on-one to listen to the victim. Please, whether they're a male, a female, a homeless person, please stop and take the time to listen. The things they have to tell you are important. Says, who are the first person you should report allegations of abuse and neglect to? Says, neglect has been discovered or is suspected and needs to be reported to Child Protective Services or other appropriate authorities. It's only for child abuse, though, huh? Who are people with disabilities most likely to be abused by? The majority of abusers are family members, relatives, caregivers, neighbors, classmates, educators, or staff members assigned to support the person with disabilities. These are my abusers. And there are so many, and it's all because they're all dismissive. They don't want to hear what I'm going through because then they have a job they have to do. So they will all talk over me and not hear it. It is psychological abuse. These people being hypercritical and judgmental towards me. Oh God, poor me, I cursed because they weren't listening. It says they ignore boundaries or invade your privacy, and absolutely, they're not listening to the abuse. They're busy talking over me, assuming things about me that they need to stop assuming. And if I had a friend or family member there to speak up, instead of allowing me to be judged harshly by these assumptions. And whenever somebody abuses me, you get to see all of them play victim afterwards. How fucked up is it that I have to deal with another Farnsworth? At least Farnsworth isn't doing it right now, but I'm not someone who knows him well. The guy that I have to deal with now is not only the police. They're going to go out of their way to be dismissive of my situation and my feelings. They're going to be hypercritical and judgmental towards me. They're going to ignore my boundaries and invade my privacy, be possessive and controlling, manipulative. These things are horrible. What is abuse of a disabled person called? Disability abuse is when a person with a disability is abused physically, financially, sexually, and or psychologically due to the person having a disability. This type of abuse has also been considered a hate crime, and it absolutely is. It is a hate crime. We're going to read this again. Systemic abuse refers to practices that take away a person's independence and dignity, and I am showing you how these practices take away my independence and dignity. You make choices without me. Systemic abuse happens in settings where other people are making decisions for the person who has a disability. And me being homeless just makes it worse. We'll get into that. Who is the first person I'm supposed to report allegations of abuse and neglect to? Well, we didn't get to do that, did we? We went 911 because it was emergencies in these situations. When we did try going to places like, oh, come on, Child Protective Services and Adult Protective Services, all of my resources were gone. They'd already been victimized out of me by the police, by the volunteers, by the courts, by having to pay for all of this travel, paying for therapy and to go see therapists, and to collecting evidence, recording everything. I had to learn how to do that stuff. Who are people with disabilities most likely to be abused by? The majority of abusers are abused. The majority of abusers are family members, relatives, caregivers, neighbors, classmates, educators, or staff members assigned to support the person with disabilities. Just so you know, I'm an asshole, everyone. I admit it. Right here, what are the three main warning signs that someone may be an abuser? Red flags and warning signs of an abuser include, but are not limited to, extreme jealousy, possessiveness, and unpredictability. Unfortunately, I'm not unpredictable. I'm very predictable, and these predators know it. They know that if they fucked with me enough, I am going to have a mental breakdown, and that allows them to do whatever they want. It's unfortunate that law enforcement does this. How do victims of emotional abuse behave? Victims of emotional abuse are often worn down so that they cannot see the harmful dynamics clearly. Well, I can see the harmful dynamics clearly, but nobody's listening. It says they come to believe that the relationship challenges are their own fault. Here's the thing, I know it's not my fault that people don't listen. I know better. I actually look at my situation and those of others. I listen to them. I don't invade their privacy. I try asking for help, and if they're not able to, I do my best to try to go somewhere else. When people offer to help me, that's important. I do have to ask people often. It says victims of emotional abuse are often worn down so that they cannot see the harmful dynamics clearly. They come to believe that the relationship challenges are their own fault. They may spend time ruminating and bargaining, considering how they can adapt their behavior or avoid confrontation. Now, that's one of the things that is difficult. I'm constantly trying to adapt so that I can be heard. What effect does abuse uniquely have for victims with disabilities? It says it worsens their disability. And that's exactly true. What makes a person vulnerable to risk and neglect? Lack of mental capacity, increasing age, being physically dependent on others, low self-esteem. However, the list is much longer than that. The primary one they try to make you think of first, lack of mental capacity, and this is what they try to push for in every situation when you're being disabled, abused. Let's see. Which type of disability has the highest risk for victimization? Individuals with cognitive disabilities are especially vulnerable to robbery and simple assault. We've gotten to see a lot of these. And then there's also the people they pretend are, or can get away with pretending are. How are disabled people exploited? People with an illness, disability, or health condition can become victims of many forms of exploitation, but are especially vulnerable to financial exploitation and sexual exploitation. If someone requires support with their daily living or finances, they may be financially exploited by their caregiver. It says, how do most abusive relationships appear at the beginning? All right, what are the 7 signs of emotional abuse? We got a lot of these, don't we? Here's what not to say to victims of emotional abuse. The stay and pray or run for the hills extremes are not the most helpful advice for victims of emotional abuse. Instead, a balanced approach involves seeking guidance from knowledgeable professionals, assessing the potential for change, and prioritizing safety. Now, prioritizing safety starts by listening to the victim. Here it says, what does emotional abuse do to a woman? Well, what about a man? Why are we so focused on women when men are the most likely victims of violence? People with disabilities are among some of the most vulnerable people in our society due to their dependence on others for care and support, or because of social isolation, their place of residence, or the nature of their disability. Screw it. homeless abuse statistics. Unhoused populations are more likely to experience violence. A study from the National Healthcare for the Homeless Council found people experienced homelessness are at an increased risk of victimization themselves. Nearly half, 49% men and 48% women of those surveyed reported experiencing violence. That's right, women are less likely on the streets. We fucking take a lot of violence over drunk women, women on drugs, and their fucking rights, which we don't have. Nobody comes to our rescue, they just watch. What percentage of homeless people have trauma? However, one other cause most people aren't aware of is trauma. A vulnerably housed population study by the University of Ottawa reports that 91% of homeless people have experienced at least one traumatic event and 99% experience childhood trauma. 99%. Are homeless people more likely to be assaulted? While unsheltered persons are statistically more likely to be arrested than other people, with 9 times as many saying they had spent at least one night in jail in the previous 6 months, according to a California Policy Lab study. They are also far more likely to be victims of crime, particularly violent crime. You arrest us for getting beat up, you son of a bitches. Says, what percentage of the homeless are mentally ill or addicted? This is, when they call you mentally ill, they're saying that you have cognitive issues and that you're violent and schizophrenic. This is how the law tries to paint it. So you need to watch your fucking words. You're getting your friends or family killed. Says it is estimated by the Stanford Institute for Economic Policy Research that 52% of the homeless in California are either severely mentally ill or addicted to hard drugs. Only 52%, not 99%. Isn't this amazing stuff to know? What percent of, let's see, this paper, published in Lancet Public Health, found 9 in 10 homeless adults have been exposed to at least one adverse childhood experience, and over half have been exposed to 4 or more adverse childhood experiences. Holy shit, they never stop as an adult either, because you're fucking homeless and disabled. I mean, holy shit, what are you supposed to do? What is the trauma most associated with homelessness? Many people experiencing homelessness have faced traumatic events such as being exposed to violence, experiencing losses, and dealing with severe severed relationships. The experience of homelessness itself is traumatic, as it involves a lack of stability, a loss of safety, and the disconnection from one's community at large. Why do homeless people become aggressive? Well, why does anybody become aggressive? Stupid. That's a no fucking brainer. Homeless humans are still humans. It says aggressive adult behavior was associated with substance abuse and major depression. The aggressive behaviors usually predated homelessness, and about half continued after the individual had become homeless. And how many of those people were abused by people in a situation where they had power over them? How many of them were taken advantage of? See, can you get PTSD from being homeless? It says the experience associated with being homeless and alone may pose the greatest risk for post-traumatic stress disorder among adolescents. It's the same thing for adults, just so you know. Says how many homeless people have PTSD. Says PTSD is common among the homeless population. The reported prevalence of PTSD among homeless ranges from 1.89 to 78.5%, depending on the study's population. If left untreated, the symptoms of PTSD can present with greater rates of comorbid alcohol and drug use, which leads to sexual risk behavior. And see, who is it that I've had to live with? You notice I don't do drugs or alcohol. But what do I have to deal with? Abuse by people in drugs and alcohol who pretend that I'm on drugs or alcohol as an excuse. What is it called when you hate homeless people? Aporophobia can lead to hate, and the most extreme cases to hate crime against poor people, including the homeless. Why are homeless people victimized? Homeless people experiencing homelessness also suffer from a lack of guardianship, increased exposure to criminals, and the inability to avoid dangerous areas. All of these factors increase an individual's vulnerability to crimes that include assault, robbery, and theft, vandalism, and sexual assault. Now imagine you're surprised seeing on my channel that it's churches where many of these crimes are happening, and that it's police who are sending us to those places, and they're also sending those violent criminals there. We have to go eat dinner next to sex offenders. God damn you. While we all get pretended like we're sex offenders as your excuse. How does being, oh wait. The stress of experiencing homelessness may exacerbate previous mental illness and encourage anxiety, fear, depression, sleeplessness, and substance use. Abuse against men. Oh, nobody cares unless it's domestic violence. We've gotten to hear hundreds of these calls, haven't we? Stop sending us to these fucking places. All they do is push us off to suicide hotline who tries to push us to commit suicide. Fucking bad idea. Oh, again, see, here it goes to male abuse. What's the most common form of abuse by all people? It's the same. It says 90% of people who commit violent physical assault are men. Oh, really? Let's see this. How much more likely are women to come forward about abuse than men? Because even on the men ones, if you ask a male question, it always tries to point it towards men. It's always men. It buries you under, of course, a bias against men. You can never find actual statistics against men unless you search. How horrible is that? It's the same when you're a disabled person making all these calls alone to the places they tell you to call. Here it says among findings, more women, 23%, than men, 19.3%, have been assaulted at least once in their lifetime. Rates of female perpetrated violence are higher than male perpetrated. Here it's got a very low number. 28.3% of the time it's a woman versus 21.6% the man. However, where is it getting its statistics? They always do the most conservative numbers when it comes to male abuse, don't they? But then we've got the college polls, and we can look those up too. Here it says which gender abuses children more. Well, that comes down to who's going to be listened to. People care if it's a male. According to the National Clearinghouse on Child Abuse and Neglect, there are more instances of abuse of children, including both physical abuse and neglect, perpetrated by women than men. Wow. We've got one here on the women's side. Most of them are that way, actually. And we're just starting to say those things. What profession in the United States is most likely to be serial killer? Yep, that's actually only for males, though. Aircraft machinists, cop, that's right. Says have a look at the top 10 occupations according to university psychologist. What career has the most serial killers? Media personalities, salespersons, surgeons, journalist or news anchor, police officer, religious official, chef, miscellaneous civil servant, military, city council, corrections, etc. 39% of female serial killers were nurses or healthcare workers. They might have a history of abuse or a recent crisis. That's right. One of those women lost a baby, so she killed everyone else's. Just as deadly inside the mind of a female serial killer. The serial killer female nurse, huh? There's a lot of them. Kristen Heather Gilbert. Yep. Northampton, Virginia. Clementine Barnabit, 1 to 35. Really? We have more, actually. Charles Cullen is a male. 29. One of the most prolific in American history. He killed 29 here. Well, that's a lot less than 35. Oh, and just because somebody wears a dress, Brutus would undergo a period of transvestitism where he used the female persona as a form of escape mechanism. Brutus kept the shoes, underwear, and for a time the bodies of his victims in a garage. That's gross. Do female serial killers target strangers? Men are far more likely to target a stranger and to have stalked their victim. Really, we'll look at that one up too. It says women are more likely to target somebody familiar to them, and that's very true. It says, and are more than twice as likely to have murdered a spouse or partner. That's right, women are more than twice as likely. Imagine that, according to this statistic. It says they tend to target the vulnerable, elderly people, ill people, or children. Do you wonder why I was targeted? All they had to do was say mentally ill. I'm afraid I'm a woman. He must be evil. He is a man. All men are violent, aren't they? Women, on the other hand, tend to gather those near them. According to Farrell, 80% of female serial killers know their victims, and they often live or work with them. The motive for male serial killers is often sex. Really? You'd actually be surprised. It says, whereas female mass murderers tend to go after money, according to a new study. Researchers specifically into the gender differences between serial killers shows women are most likely to kill for financial gain, usually targeting someone familiar to them. It also says pornography is the most common interest among serial killers. Now, one of the things about this serial killers is that many of these people, they fantasize it in their careers. Many of them. If you look at arrest records, it shows that men are more abusive. If you look at every other study, it shows that women are. Female predators. The traits and behaviors that stood out for females included impulsivity, lack of behavioral control, sexual promiscuity, criminal diversity, deceitfulness, and a lack of realistic goals. People have unrealistic goals. Oh, come on, I'm not asking about comic book. It says here, who stalks whom? This one right here, recording arrest records and fact on stalking. It says who stalks whom? Men commit most stalking. No, men are committing the most stalking. They're not. I can prove that. It It says 4 out of every 5 stalking victims are women. That's very true, but we have a whole bunch of stuff here. Oh God, I gotta pee. National Institute of Justice Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, a study of women who stalk. We've got the ones that are polls of men and women, and those show a much different story. Now we can show you how we ended up this way with special rights. God, I gotta pee so bad. I do apologize. Now we start getting down this rabbit hole. We get to see. Oh my God, I gotta pee. We're gonna get onto this one next because this is really interesting. But it's also important because the polls versus the reality. And then, of course, what a woman is taught versus what a man is taught. A woman being uncomfortable with someone for being ugly means that that ugly person is committing a crime. Anyway, one of the things that I want to get into is a lot of those different crimes, why they happen, also why it is that men are actually the most likely. Now they want to pop up different stuff from different places, and that's another thing we can get into as well. It's called primary beneficiary. And of course, people care. When it comes to a woman being abused, they'll look it up. There's all for women. So looking it up is a good thing, right? There are no services for men. Not